This week, the state comes to the rescue with millions for communities hard hit by Tropical Storm Irene.
We cobbled together some state funds, and we cobbled together some federal funds, and we came up with $60 million to fully cover the local share of all the communities who were affected.
Scientists offered new clues into the origins of the mysterious disease killing millions of bats.
It's considered the worst wildlife health crisis ever in North America, so it's a true disaster.
Divers take to Lake George in hopes of killing an invasive species before it spreads further into the Adirondacks.
I think that we are looking at long-term management of this species.
Also this week, a runner training for his first marathon shares the motivation and inspiration behind the biggest race of his life.
I had an opportunity to combine two things that are really important to me, helping my friends and running. So it really was a no-brainer.
It's humbling that somebody is that willing to help out. He never thought twice about it.
On this week's Roundtable, how recreation plays an important role in the health and quality of life of local communities. A former Expo makes a pitch to bring baseball back to Montreal.
I love Montreal. Baseball is a part of Montreal.
And how this church in Plattsburgh will be forever connected to the sinking of the Titanic 100 years ago.
Those flooring tiles destined for Plattsburgh are still in the wreck today at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Mountain Lake Journal on Mountain Lake PBS is made possible in part by CVPH Medical Center and the Champlain Valley Heart Center at CVPH, bringing cardiac care closer to home for all North Country residents.
NBT Bank, offering personal banking, financial planning, commercial and business banking. nbtbank.com. Member FDIC.
Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. We hope you had a nice Easter and Passover. We begin with the week's headlines. New York State is coming to the rescue of communities hard hit by tropical storms Irene and Lee. Governor Cuomo traveled this week to the Catskills in Schoharie County, which had widespread damage from Irene, some of the worst in the region's history. The governor announced the state is going to pick up local communities' share of the cleanup costs, totaling more than $60 million.
The federal government, through FEMA, reimburses 75%. The remaining 25% is normally split between the state and the local government, 12.5% and 12.5%. The problem is the damage here was so great. 12.5% doesn't sound like much, but 12.5% of $800 million is a lot of money. And it's a lot of money on communities that were already taxed and overtaxed. And it would have caused local communities to have to double, in some places, their local taxes to pay just for this cost. And every local official said that we can't do.
In the North Country, the state will pick up just shy of $2 million in recovery costs for Essex County and about $650,000 for Clinton County. State Ag Commissioner Darrell Aubertine came to the town of Keene to deliver the news, which for town leaders struggling to pay to clean up and repair the damage is a big boost.
Well, it means a lot for our town. I mean, fortunately, we were only looking at possibly about a $400,000 debt. So to be receiving that extra 12.5% definitely will help us with our budget next year. And not only for the town of Keene, but Essex County. It's about a $1.8 million value to Essex County. So it's a big plus for all of us.
The money was put in the state budget by the governor and lawmakers. State Senator Betty Little said it'll help local governments with limited resources who have faced a real challenge recovering from the storm. The emotional toll still lingers for many flooding victims. A mental health program launched by the state last fall is offering counseling and other services for people who are still struggling to cope.
When people have gone through a crisis like this, they have somebody to talk to and somebody to help them see, the path to getting to recovery. And they're there to help the people get together and find a way to get back to normal.
After any large-scale event, it's certainly very emotional for people. And so to be able to get some assistance for mental health issues, or even just someone to be able to talk to.
Project Hope has a crisis team that's been going door to door in communities in Essex and Clinton counties. The service is free, and those who receive it can remain anonymous. You'll find a link on how to contact Project Hope on our website. Scientists now say the white nose syndrome epidemic that's killed as many as 7 million bats in New York and 18 other states and 4 provinces of Canada is being caused by a fungus from Europe. Researchers don't know how the fungus crossed the Atlantic, but say it's likely tourists carried some of the spores into a cave near Albany, where the disease was first detected 5 years ago.
Because it's a lab experiment, it's a scientific experiment, it just makes the theory all the more stronger that indeed this fungus came here from Europe rather than the fungus having been here all along, and suddenly bats just started getting sick.
Europe has not suffered as severe a bat die-off. Researchers say that could be because bats there have developed immunity to the fungus. Lab experiments also confirm details of how the fungus is killing the bats, waking them up in a weakened state from hibernation. Many then die after flying into the cold in search of insects. The study, which involved researchers from Canada, the U.S., and Germany, was published this week in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Conservation groups are pushing for more federal funding for research, also to put more caves off limits to try to prevent the spread of the disease, and put several species of bats, including New York's little brown, on the federal endangered list.
We are petitioning the White House, and we are asking that they step in and provide direction and guidance to the various federal agencies involved to try to get them on the same page, to try to get a plan together, to move forward more quickly, and in particular to start implementing some of these management actions that we feel are really crucial to try to stop this disease from moving into new parts of the country.
And this week came word bats have now tested positive in Missouri, the first evidence of the disease west of the Mississippi River. Scuba divers will head back into Lake George in the next week to lay hundreds of plastic mats that they're using again this spring before the start of the busy summer season to smother the Asian clam, an invasive species that in the past year has spread to 3 more areas of the lake.
We're now handling 4 populations, and the plan is to manage about 15 acres of infested area.
The mats are effective, killing about 99% of the clams. The scientists will also try using underwater suction to get some of the remaining clams. They're also planning another lake-wide survey of hundreds of sites to make sure the clam hasn't spread to other parts of Lake George.
To the best of our knowledge, that's where they are. Those are the known sites. I think that we are looking at long-term management of this species. We are being effective at knocking back the population significantly, 98%, in the areas that are treated, but we couldn't treat all the areas at once. So this is going to be a multi-year treatment, but we're looking to really reduce the population, and if we can eradicate them, that would be fantastic. But I think we're all in the mindset of a few more years of management and control.
Last year, researchers and local groups spent more than $600,000 tackling the Asian clam and say they'll likely spend that or more this year. They're also looking to expand outreach efforts to warn fishermen about using Asian clams as bait and inspecting boats to help prevent more of the clams from getting into the lake. The state is considering whether to make teachers' evaluations available to parents. Governor Andrew Cuomo says he believes parents have a right to know the results of the evaluations. The governor and Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver are considering opening the records to parents on a limited basis, but not to the general public. With the state budget passed, lawmakers are looking at other bills now, including one that's been on the back burner in New York for the past few years, medical marijuana. Governor Cuomo, who in his 2010 campaign rejected legalizing marijuana for medical use, has said he would reconsider, but he said this week he isn't convinced the benefits outweigh the risk. The governor's push to pass an on-time budget has earned him record-high approval numbers in a new Siena poll. 73% of voters view him favorably, but only 4 out of 10 say Cuomo has made state government more open and transparent. And another poll shows that 78% of voters want New York to increase its minimum wage from $7.25 an hour. 53% of Republicans support the move, which is opposed by the Senate's Republican majority. 52% favor increasing the minimum wage to $8.50 or more an hour. Assembly Speaker Silver says it is time to raise the minimum wage to help the working poor. There's still no sign of a missing teenager in the Adirondacks, and now his family is offering a reward. 18-year-old Colin Gillis disappeared a month ago after leaving a party in Tupper Lake. He was last seen walking along Route 3 near the Piercefield town line. Search teams and volunteers searched for a week but turned up no firm leads on what happened to Gillis, who was home on spring break from college. Now his family is offering a $10,000 reward for his safe return to try to get people to come forward with information. Sex offenders in New York are being shut out of online games that let them interact with children. The state attorney general, Eric Schneiderman, says gaming companies, including Microsoft and Apple, have joined with the state to shut down or limit more than 3,500 accounts held by sex offenders.
This initiative protects the most vulnerable segment of our population from the most dangerous segment of our population. Online gaming is not just a digital playground. It has the potential to be a 21st century crime scene.
The state's registered sex offenders are required to register all their email addresses and online accounts with the state, but many games allow them to talk anonymously to kids online. Jay Peak Resort has rolled out new plans to expand. The resort has already built a hotel, conference center, water park, ice arena, and golf course to lure visitors all year round. Now Jay Peak in the Northeast Kingdom wants approval to build 2 more hotels and 700 condominium units. The ski area also wants to add 5 more ski lifts. And like other mountains in Vermont, Jay Peak is still open for skiing. It got more than a foot of fresh snow this week as our spring weather took yet another turn. Not exactly baseball weather this week, but on opening day of the Major League season, a former Expo was making a pitch to bring baseball back to Montreal.
I love Montreal. Baseball is a part of Montreal. Since 1969, since Jackie Robinson was here, we have a lot of roots in this town. Tell all the business community that Montreal needs baseball, and we want it back. And I think it's time for us to get this thing back. It's going to take a unit. We're going to have to change the attitude here in Montreal about why we lost the team, how we lost the team, who stole the team.
The Expos moved to Washington, D.C. 8 years ago to become the Washington Nationals. The campaign to bring an international or even lure a major league team from another city to Montreal kicks off this summer when a dozen members of the 1981 Expos team that was 1 pitch away from reaching the World Series will reunite for a weekend. They'll also pay tribute to Hall of Fame Expos catcher Gary Carter, who died of cancer back in February. For the roundtable this week, a few weeks ago we held a live call-in program here on Mountain Lake PBS with a group called Partnership for Community Development that formed about 3 years ago, looking for ways to grow and enrich the economic health of the Plattsburgh region over the next 30 years. Next week, the group is holding the second in a series of Vision to Action presentations to try to get the community on board and involved. So what are the goals? We're joined by SUNY Plattsburgh Business and Economics Professor Colin Reed, Steve Peters, who is the city's Recreation Director, and Lori Williams with the Clinton County Health Department. First of all, the Vision to Action Forum focused on the importance, the first one focused on the importance of a vibrant arts community and efforts to renovate the Strand Theater in downtown Plattsburgh into a performing arts center. The second is now going to highlight recreational opportunities. Why recreation?
Both elements and future elements on transportation and education share one really important quality, in that we're really focusing on quality of life aspects in Clinton County. There's other great groups doing an awful lot of really good economic development work, but we recognize that the lifeblood of any area, especially rural areas in the United States, is to be able to retain, attract, or perhaps maybe even re-attract young families. A lot of our children will leave, go off to college. It would be nice to create some opportunities for them to return. And companies like the hospital or the university or some of the major employers can give some possibilities for employment. But usually when we try to attract a young family, there's also a spouse that would like to come along. We need to arrange for economic opportunities for them. But those spouses in particular really look for other aspects of quality of life. Hence the importance of the arts and investment in recreation to be able to reattract these individuals. It's also a recognition that Plattsburgh doesn't compete with Peru and with Moors for these families. It competes with Eugene, Oregon, and San Antonio, Texas, and Boulder, Colorado. Doctors that may or nurses that may want to come to CVPH are considering offers from anywhere in the country. So we need to do something that sets us on the same level as some of these really other really attractive, youthful communities around the country.
So the core group brought in a subcommittee, which involved Steve and Lori and several other members, to sort of look at recreation. Many people would probably say right off the bat, you guys have great recreation. Look at the skiing you've got Lake Champlain, canoeing, kayaking, boating, you've got biking, miles and miles of highways. So how do you improve on that, they would probably ask. Don't you already have a great carrot there to dangle in front of people that you want to lure to the area to live and work? So the committee got together, and did you identify the strong points but then look at other areas where you can say, well, maybe there's more we can do?
Well, actually, we did do that. That was one of the first steps that we felt was very necessary, is to determine those wonderful assets that we already had in place and to capitalize on those. Because like anything else, if you don't continue to grow it, even in your own community, it dies, and it can die very quickly on the vine. So those were some of our first steps. For us at the Clinton County Health Department, this was a natural committee for us to participate on, because the economic health of our community very much ties back to the overall general health of all of our residents.
And it comes at a time, Steve, that the city's been looking at expanding the recreational opportunities.
Exactly. Recreation, I think half a generation ago was considered more diversionary for folks, and now we're recognizing it with an obesity rate of 30% in the United States, recognizing that recreation is now necessary as individual development and for community development. So people not only just want to go, as Colin said, to a place where there's business, but they want to go to a place where, what are they going to do when they're not working? How are they going to enjoy themselves?
And in the past few years, we've seen the addition of events that not only are great for the people here, but would be attractive to people from away, looking at the community and saying, what's there for me? The half marathon, now in its third year this year. And the Rock Eater last year, the premiere. But that was a fun event that brings out people, and people who are health conscious and people who like to recreate in a different way. One of the most obvious areas of growth and addressing this has been the Saranac River Trail, which has just opened. The official dedication is coming up in May, but this has been a project for a few years where people have been saying we need a multi-use trail in the city, and along the Saranac River, many people thought was the perfect spot for it.
Yes, and it was. And and kudos to the city of Plattsburgh, and in particular to Kevin Farrington, their engineer, who actually initiated a great deal of the Saranac River Trail implementation. So over the last couple of years, pieces of that trail have been built, and essentially it is done. And so the Saranac River Trail will go from George Angel Drive on Upper River Street, come very close to the river many times through the SUNY Plattsburgh campus, and ends at one of the footbridges just behind the city police department. We see families out there, we've seen runners out there, we've seen walkers, all ages.
And this is the type of attraction that, again, other communities have. And when people are looking, where do I want to go? I may have many options. They want a trail, a beautiful trail for walking, running, biking in their community.
They do, and if you look at some of the most successful towns of our size, they have some sort of amenity like that that brings people out. People are being brought downtown, so they're more likely to become aware of the downtown revitalization. That downtown is getting more exciting every year, so that helps with the local businesses down there.
But already there's talk of expanding it and maybe continuing it well beyond the city and town of Plattsburgh.
Absolutely. I think this is another opportunity that's been basically set right on our laps, right in front of us.
What are some of the other visions that the committee had as far as trails or biking, or one thing that the city is looking into is the possibility of having whitewater rapids for kayakers in the city?
Yeah, that's something that can be a game changer for any downtown. Any successful downtown has active recreation, and so that's something where at this point, there's that void for us. Whitewater kayaking is it definitely attracts a population. They'll drive 300 miles in a weekend for the right waves. They have disposable income. They need to afford the equipment. And it's something where in a river, we've been told by some of the best in the world, literally, that the best parts on the Saranac River to kayak and paddle are actually right downtown.
Were there other areas where you saw deficiencies? Maybe bike trails may be an example where you looked at it and said, we don't really have the network that we need, and that it may be something to think about in the future.
Well, we actually brought a group together from the community, a little over 20 people, about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And Steve very well brought them through a process to try and identify where some of the deficiencies were. And sometimes your deficiencies exist within your already established infrastructure for recreation opportunities. And these folks were actually able to identify some of the ways to make those weaknesses stronger. And we're going to talk about some of those results on April 19th.
That's coming up next Thursday, April 19th. This is the second forum. Once again, the event is happening next Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Krinovitz Recital Hall in Hawkins Hall on the Plattsburgh State campus. And then 1 week after that, on Thursday, April 26th, you can join us for a live hour-long call-in program here on Mountain Lake PBS, like we did a couple of months ago. We'll continue the discussion. We encourage you to join us with your phone calls. Join us on Facebook with sending in questions that we'll take live on the air, and that will be coming up on April 26th, Thursday night at 8 o'clock, right here on Mountain Lake PBS. Joshua Jabut has never run in a marathon, but coming up on Monday, the occupational therapist from Plattsburgh will line up with thousands of others to race in the Boston Marathon. Every competitor has their own reason for running in the race, but as WCAX-TV's Scott Fleischman tells us, Josh's motivation hits close to home.
With each foot that hits the pavement, Joshua Jabut's heart is working harder and harder.
You go out there and you're pretty much on your own. You're pushing yourself to your limits.
It's been like that ever since Josh's days of running track at Seton Catholic High.
I'm going to be back next weekend.
Okay.
His friendship with Allison Rosenbaum started well before that, in grade school. It's still going strong today.
It's always been the relationship where even if we're not together all of the time, as soon as you get back together, it picks up right where it left off.
The two will have plenty to talk about on April 16th in Boston.
Competing in the Boston Marathon, what an accomplishment.
If you ever ask me at any point in my running career, could my training be better? Yes, it can always be better, but I'm certain I'm going to be ready for the race.
Joshua just isn't running on April 16th to say that he completed a marathon. You see, there's some motivation and inspiration behind his effort, and he can be found just a few miles away from Seton Catholic in Peru, New York.
Yeah, now I can defend myself verbally a little stronger.
Yeah. Roger Long is Allison's father. ALS has paralyzed Roger's body, leaving his mind completely intact. Roger and wife Darlene have had one mission since his diagnosis in 2009.
Now that we know what we've got, what can we do to fight the disease, and what can we do to help eradicate the disease?
The two started raising money and awareness. Then they heard about a Boston Marathon fundraiser for ALS. Josh sprinted at the chance.
I had an opportunity to combine two things that are really important to me, helping my friends and running. So it really was a no-brainer.
it's humbling that somebody is that willing to help out. He never thought twice about it.
He was honored to run for us. We're more honored to have him do it for us.
The goal is to raise $7,500 for the UMass ALS Champion Fund. Finishing the race is an added bonus, but it'll still feel pretty good when those feet and that big heart reach the finish line.
When I cross the finish line, I'm going to have Roger and Darlene and Allison and the whole ALS community on my mind.
If I was able, I'd just hug him. Yeah. And I imagine it'll be an emotional day.
And if you're interested in donating to the ALS Champion Fund, we have a link as well as mailing information on our website at mountainlake.org.
Mountain Lake Journal on Mountain Lake PBS is made possible in part by CVPH Medical Center and the Champlain Valley Heart Center at CVPH, bringing cardiac care closer to home for all North Country residents.
NBT Bank, offering personal banking, financial planning, commercial and business banking. NBTbank.com. Member FDIC.
And finally, 100 years ago this week, the Titanic sank in the North Atlantic, a disaster that had an impact worldwide, even here in the city of Plattsburgh.
Although Plattsburgh was fortunate that none of her citizens met death in the sinking of the ill-fated steamer Titanic, yet the going down of the vessel resulted in the loss of goods in her cargo, which were intended for use in this city.
At the time, St. John's Catholic Church was undergoing a major renovation project, but the Italian marble and tile floor coverings from England never made it.
Those flooring tiles destined for Plattsburgh are still in the wreck today at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
And that's not the Titanic's only connection to Plattsburgh, as the steamer was making its way through a narrow channel minutes after leaving the dock in Southampton, England. Its propellers created so much suction it ripped the SS New York from its moorings. The boat came within 3 feet of crashing into the Titanic. The SS New York was later renamed the USS Plattsburgh during World War I.
Now, if that would have even brushed the hull of the Titanic, even in the most minor way, they would have had to turn around and go back. I mean, it would have totally changed history. The ship may not have even sunk.
And the richest man aboard the Titanic, American businessman John Jacob Astor, was no stranger to Plattsburgh. The multimillionaire was known to stay at the Fouquet House in the city. The former luxurious hotel is now an apartment building at the intersection of McDonough and Bridge Streets. Another casualty of the sunken ship was Major Archibald Budd, a military aide to President William Taft. They had just visited the Plattsburgh and Vermont areas 3 years earlier to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the discovery of Lake Champlain.
3 years later, he was ordered by Taft to take a well-deserved vacation, and he took that vacation on the Titanic.
And our Derek Muirden visited the hallowed burial grounds for victims of the Titanic in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
When the Titanic sank on April the 15th in 1912, it sank 700 nautical miles to the east of Halifax, and Halifax was chosen as the recovery city.
You can watch his roadside adventure this Saturday afternoon at 5 here on Mountain Lake PBS. And that is Mountain Lake Journal for this week. Stay with us now for an all-new Mountain Lake Journal Extra coming up next. I'm Tom Halleck. For all of us here at Mountain Lake PBS, thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next week.